Blue-Eye Samurai. Two piercing blue eyes, a sword forged in orange fire, red blood on white snow. This was, without a doubt, one of the shows I was the most excited to talk about on this list. Hell, the list probably wouldn't have existed without it, but I was so blown away with its stellar visuals, exceptionally sharp dialogue, gloriously violent action sequences, and a surprisingly compelling exploration into sex, sexuality, and gender that I immediately had to rank my top 12 shows with my script editor pre-game Gav, shout out to all you Anime FMK fans out there, just so I could find out where it fell, and thus the list was born. Blue-Eye Samurai is, like most modern samurai-themed media, a throwback to Akira Kurosawa's extensive filmography, the production design of the Zatoichi series, and the anachronistic vibes of Tarantino's Kill Bill. The story of a young woman named Mizu, disguised as a man and hiding her mixed heritage as she hunts down the only 4 white men in early Edo Japan, as to promptly end their lives for daring to curse her with her titular blue eyes and avenge her mother. It's Dear White People, but written in blood. Along this journey, she is mentored by a blind swordsmith, aided by a soba chef with no hands, and starts a hilariously gay but not gay will they won't they with Not Zuko, whose ex-fiancé is busy showing feet on her only sensu. If that dumb joke makes even one person laugh, I win. Of course, there's our villains of the piece, chief among them being Kill Me I'm Irish, one of Mizu's potential papas, who is supported by his sadist heterosexual husband and right-hand On its face, it's a classic revenge tale, but it's in the details where things go from standard to extraordinary. Mizu's journey takes her into the belly of a beast that threatens to consume all of Japan, all the while slowly unraveling the tapestry of her life and the myriad of conflicts that have turned her into this stoic, murderous demon. And with her supporting cast, the show explores many complicated and fascinating themes. Not always in the most nuanced way, mind you, but in one that feels distinctly passionate and true to itself. But before we get into the meat, we must remember that we first eat with our eyes. And Blue-Eye Samurai is a feast to be sure. Painted backgrounds that blend seamlessly with the 3D, creating one of the most astonishingly gorgeous shows I've literally ever seen. And while the character models aren't quite up to this lofty standard, they're more than attractive enough in their own right. Every character is visually distinct, adorned in, mostly, era-accurate clothing and accoutrement. Mizu is a standout, with her water aesthetic and orange-tinged glasses. Honestly, the color theory in the show is top-notch, and it's all supported by unbelievably effective lighting. Every scene, every moment is perfectly lit. From sunlight to moonlight to candlelight. The mood is fucking impeccable, no matter the shot. It all comes together to elevate every other element of the series, from its bloody combat to its softer moments of reflection. In a list with standout visuals aplenty, Blue-Eye Samurai readily challenges all of its contemporaries with bold, confident direction and unassailable style. And I wasn't touching myself when I wrote this, but I could've. Meanwhile, the OST feels a little bit more subdued. While not forgettable and certainly effective in its own right, it feels more supplementary to the overall production, underpinning and supporting the visuals while not standing out too much. But it's the needle drops that hit the hardest. While their usage of battle without honor or humanity might elicit groans from older audiences, hi, I'm older audiences, Blue-Eye Samurai is obviously actively courting the same type of audience that Unalive William did 20 years ago. This can also be seen with Chiemi Eri's Kushimoto Bushi and Aizuban Daisan, and even more so with Genie 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 from the Stray Cats. But the true star of the soundtrack is their Japanese cover of For Whom the Bell Tolls by Emmy Meyer. An absolutely stellar choice that would have potentially fallen flat if they'd just used the original, but instead elevates the scene tremendously, making it one of the absolute best fights in the show. And speaking of those fights, good God does Blue-Eye Samurai deliver with a bloody flourish. Whether they be one-on-one or one versus many, the choreography roots itself in traditional, real-world sword fighting styles, while enhancing the action with acrobatics and insane feats of strength and speed. Underpinned by a keen, constant sense of danger, its commitment to realistic violence shows us just how the right or wrong injury can end a fight. And a life. Even if the amount of damage Mizu can apparently take borders on the John Wickian. The fight at the Shindoryu dojo is a spectacular introduction, exemplifying both Mizu's abilities and the style and strengths of Blue Eye's action. The camera work is phenomenal, carefully utilizing slow motion to emphasize Mizu's speed, effortlessly and brutally disabling her opponents. The savage creativity of her takedowns sets a high standard for the rest of the show, and more importantly, gives us a fantastic feel for her character. Cocky, arrogant, but with the intent of goading her opponents and throwing them emotionally off balance. It's also the fight that got me to watch the show. And as the series goes on, we are treated to a smorgasbord, or a smorgasword, of viciously delicious combat, as blades fly and blood flows. Even just a sparring session between Mizu and her weak, cowardly, foolish ex-husband has enough thrilling and creative blade flirting to put Blue Eye Samurai's action up near the top of the list for me. Be it in the depths of Fowler's castle against nameless goons and a terrifying ogre of a man, wood by the way, or an army of claw-wielding soldiers revealing her sword to also be a naginata, and what we thought was anime bullshit via her weighted gear was actually another kind of even cooler anime bullshit! But as we travel down this river like an errant leaf, we approach a blade. The story of Blue Eye Samurai. Does it cut through us with merciless ease, or do we carelessly float past it, spared its wrath? Well, this is where the reference breaks down, because while Masamune's sword was considered the final blade over Muramasa's, this story cuts deep, and it does not discriminate. From a young age, Mizu, played by Maya Erskine, suffered merciless persecution. However, she soon comes across Master Eiji, or as I call him, Sword Daddy, voiced by the Keri Hiroyuki Tagawa. Blind but capable, and with all the expected wisdom of a character like this, he reluctantly invites her in, and slowly teaches her to smith, while she secretly studies the techniques of his clients. And throughout all this, she clings to a hatred that sits deep inside her, burning like a hot ball of molten steel that cannot be quenched. A hatred for both the man who wronged her mother, but also herself, for who and what she is. Worse, this hatred is only tempered when a golden, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity at love and peace is ripped away by cowardice and greed, betrayed by her husband and her supposed mother, leaving her more alone than she's ever been. And this loneliness, even more so than her hatred, is key to her character. As while revenge motivates her, it's trust and companionship that she truly needs, even if it's initially in service of said vengeance. And in that companionship, we first find Ringo. A young man with dreams of greatness, but born without hands, he finds himself enamored by Mizu, hoping to become her apprentice and the apple of her blue eye. He's also one of the only characters we see discover her peaches. And slowly but surely, this ball of optimism and surprising utility strips Mizu of her armor. At first metaphorically, but later on, literally. His loyalty to her becomes a great strength, both for her and the plot. And interestingly, I initially thought I'd hate this character, despite his masterful voice work from the GOAT Masaoka, but much like Mizu, he worked his way into my heart with his cute little echoes and relentless loyalty.
Snowcap!
Also, boy be packing down there. Like, I know you can't see it because it's censored, but while he might not have hands, any partner he's with is gonna need both. But being serious for a moment, I think it's worth pointing out how this series approaches disabilities. Between Ringo's makeshift instruments and general know-how, and Master Eiji's mental fortitude and environmental awareness, both characters have had to overcome great hardship and adapt in a society that refuses to accommodate them. They thrive and progress in their own ways, and this even affects Mizu. Because while she wasn't born with a disability per se, her life is functionally different and worse because of her heritage, changing how others perceive her. Ringo even says,
"You're deformed, but you're still strong."
But aside from our co-Ringo star, we have Taigen, played by Darren Barnett, a student of Shindoryu and Mizu's now eternal rival. We watch as he suffers defeat and dishonor at her hands, leading him to chase her intent on a rematch. Also, he may regain his reputation, both for the sake of himself and his beloved would-be fiancée Akemi, played by Brenda Song, the daughter of a nouveau riche lord. And don't let that not Zuko joke from earlier give you the wrong idea. While he starts off as an insufferable, arrogant prick, he slowly warms to Mizu, and as their rivalry evolves into an awkward friendship, with even more awkward boners, we see that he, too, is multifaceted and fiercely loyal. This is exemplified when Heiji Shindo is torturing him for information on Mizu, and he, in no uncertain terms, tells Shindo to eat shit with his right hand. But going back to Akemi, the daughter of that aforementioned samurai lord, her journey is a fascinating companion to Mizu's, as she tries to escape an arranged marriage and find Taigen, and thus freedom, outside her castle in Kyoto. she's confronted by an ultimatum via Best Mom Seki, played by the living legend and Duke of all gays, George Takei. Her only options are
proper wife or improper whore.
So she chooses proper whore. Grifting a traveling flesh peddler all the way to Mihonoseki in search for her man, she finds herself under the roof of Madame Kaji, played by motherfucking Mulan herself, Mina Wen. Also, side note, this scene with her speaking to Mizu, a woman disguised as a man, while talking about the gender dynamic of Edo Japan, is my exact kind of clever. This scene is for me. This is my hole. It was made for me. And between Madame Kaji's brusque dialogue,
there is no end to that sentence that matters,
and the ruthless dynamic of the brothel, we find ourselves equally enthralled and disgusted as we slip into the crustiest sheets of the red light district. And Akemi is charged with a trial by fire. But almost effortlessly, and in one of the most brilliant, hilarious, and mesmerizing scenes in the entire show, she pulls off a stunning feat, returning her client's erectile function before snowballing poetry back and forth. She delivers the best lines, but he gets the comeback. Where Mizu's story sees her stealthily exploiting the benefits of being a man in Edo Japan through the eyes of a woman, Akemi's story strides directly into the tiger pit that is living openly as a woman in this cruelly suffocating, unequal period. But despite it all, she maintains her agency, and whether she is forced to work within the confines of a gilded cage or deviant brothel, she always comes out the other side, standing tall with her dignity intact while paying her success forward to those who looked out for her. But what is a tale of revenge without a target? And there is no target bigger, rounder, or redder than Abijah Fowler, played by Kenneth Branagh? A cruel, loquacious, aspiring despot set on toppling the shogun, all to gain control of the country via a shadow government. And somehow, every line out of this man's mouth is a contender for best line in the show.
No one murders so well as the British. It's our #1 export.
His monologues flow like single malt whiskey, his one-liners could kill from 400 yards, and his screen presence is so overpowering, it takes almost all of Edo burning to rip the focus away from him. And Randall Park as Heiji Shindo is a slimy, sadistic snake of a man who tries to outwit Mizu and company only to end up sans a hand and later suffering a death so poetic it would make this man He also plans the best road trips. But girl, you better wash that Tengu mask. Actually, no, just burn it. Burn it like the Capitol. Speaking of this particular joke, it's worth noting that this show's treatment of nudity and sexuality as a whole is remarkably mature. While it does garner some laughs with the occasional hanging dong, all of Mizu's nudity is either unceremonious or remarkably reverent. It never feels too gratuitous, and rarely exploitative. It's there to help fill out a story eager to explore the breadth of the human condition. And sex is examined in fascinating ways, as an expression of love, as a tool, as art, and, well, whatever you call what Heiji and Abijah get up to. And I could probably go on, covering every episode of this show in depth, up to its somewhat lackluster but ultimately satisfying finale, with a cliffhanger that has me as excited as it does mind-boggled. But there's one episode in particular that stands out above the rest. Episode 5, The Tale of the Ronin and the Bride. We open on a Bunraku puppet show, Bunraku puppets being an inspiration for the character designs, by the way. And in this story, we find a Ronin, who has dedicated his life to revenge. However, when the Ronin finds love, this burning desire calms to a dying ember, and he settles down to have a family. Before finding out his wife, the mother of his child, was a member of the clan he swore revenge against. Unable to contain his hatred, he slays them both, and in doing so, turns his wife into an Onryo, a vicious and vengeful demon. We see this play throughout the episode, paralleled by flashbacks to Mizu's life, falling in love with a man named Mikio, only to be betrayed, and left with nothing else but her reignited hatred. The fascinating part of this episode, besides its stellar action and heartbreaking tragedy, is how both the major characters of the play mirror Mizu. She is both the Ronin and the bride. She is both the man and the woman, speaking to her identity, embracing masculinity and the privilege that comes with it, while still distinctly a woman, and possibly even speaking to her mixed heritage. She is large, and she contains multitudes. Now, I've talked at great lengths about the show, with enough praise to bury Fuji-san, but it isn't without some issues, some more subjective than others. not the least of which being how the series will often eschew cultural and historical accuracy in order to serve the narrative, its thematic momentum, and, well, rule of cool. Some anachronistic dialogue here, some muddy terminology there. One of the biggest standouts, however, being gunsmiths did exist in Edo, Japan, so it's likely the shogun would have had guns himself. Its dialogue can also feel a bit cliche in places, and its story does follow some familiar beats, as it is, first and foremost, a revenge story calling back to classic Kurosawa films. Despite all that though, Season 1 of Blue Eye Samurai is a fucking knockout. I can't even imagine how Season 2 is going to play once we're in London. And I also don't know how they're gonna handle the language barrier, if they even are. I mean, it's possible the show won't even bother bringing it up. We'll have to see when the next season drops in... Oh god, it's gonna be like 2026, isn't it? Well, you know, it's fine, because at least I have more Arcane to look forward to this November. I need it. I need it.